All right, now let's talk about lighting in cinematography and discuss the important aspects and some terminology. So first up, we have light quality, and this refers to whether the light is soft light or hard light. All right, the distinguishing features being with soft light, very even. Well, soft is a good way of describing it, right? But very even lighting, soft transitions to shadow, and not a lot of high contrast details created by the lighting. Right? Hard light is the exact opposite of that, with fairly hard, high contrast details being created by the light source, very abrupt transitions to shadow, and especially when the light source comes from the side, we're actually able to see a lot of interesting surface detail on our particular subject. All right, so light sources, which cast light from a large surface area, such as this overcast sky, is going to create very soft lighting, right? Another example here with K in Blade Runner 2049, we've got a window off screen, which is the primary light source in this this sequence here, right? So very, fairly large surface area, creating the lighting. So pretty soft lighting here. Again, a shot of Lieutenant Joshi from Blade Runner 20. Again, same deal happening here with Lieutenant Joshi being illuminated from a fairly large light source, creating nice soft lighting, soft shadows, and of course, hard lighting being created by the opposite type of light source. So here, this is actually great. We can see the practical light source being used in the scene to illuminate, again, Joshi in this shot here in Kay's apartment. And so, fairly small surface area that is emitting light, creating pretty hard lighting and shadows on her face, right? Same deal here when Kay is at the orphanage, very hard lighting being cast on his face. We get some really hard transition to shadow here, as well as when Old Man Deckard is talking to Neander Wallace. We got some interesting hard lighting on the side here being cast onto Deckard's face, giving a very abrupt transition to shadow. Pretty dramatic effect there. Right, so that's the difference between hard and soft lighting. And another thing to keep in mind when setting up soft versus hard lighting is actually the distance of light source to object. With light sources placed farther away from the subject, creating harder lighting, harder shadows, and in the exact opposite sense, a light source being positioned close to an object, creating softer lighting and softer shadows. So surface area of the light source as well as distance to the subject. This will both affect the quality of light. All right, we also have light direction, some terminology for common directions that our lighting can be cast from. All right, we've got flat lighting being cast from basically as close to the camera's position as we can get. Again, using some examples again from Blade Runner 2049 with K with fairly flat lighting on his face. Right in this example, there's butterfly lighting named for the shape of shadow that gets created under the nose. When using this type of lighting, butterfly lighting has the light source positioned slightly above the camera, shining down onto the subject's face, but not directly overhead. That would be a bit more dramatic and a bit more extreme. All right, side lighting, another example here when Kay is going to look for Deckard. We've got some side lighting in this room here, of course, informed by the practical windows on the set. So yeah, I mean, fairly self-explanatory. We've got light coming in from one direction, leaving the other side of the face mostly in shadow. And Rembrandt lighting, another really interesting one, most often achieved using a 3-point lighting setup that we'll talk about in a few moments. But this example of Lieutenant Joshi here being a great example of Rembrandt lighting, the distinguishing feature being this triangle of light formed on the dark side of the face, right? So we have our key light on this side of the face, but angled in such a way that there's just this little triangle of light on the dark side of the face, on the cheek there, right? So that is Rembrandt lighting, named after the famous painter who used this type of lighting in many, many paintings. All right, we've got overhead lighting, again, pretty self-explanatory, like the overhead lighting in this, I guess, this file archive environment with Thomas Lamarcus's character trying to find this information for K, right? Just pretty distinct overhead lighting coming straight down from the ceiling. All right, backlighting, very commonly used to, shroud a character in mystery, or give some other dramatic effect, like when Neander Wallace is talking to Deckard here. We can kind of see where the light source is right behind him, and so all we get is this backlighting, just visible on his silhouette, really, just kind of giving us the outline of the character, a bit on his nose too. And finally, bottom lighting, very seldomly used because it kind of gives this weird kind of effect of, like sitting around a campfire and like telling ghost stories where you shine the flashlight up in your face to make you look all scary. This is quite seldomly used, and most likely, if used in a movie, it'll be practically informed, such as in this shot with Kay in his kitchen. Right, we got the light coming from kind of this location right down here. So from a practical standpoint, it makes sense to have mostly bottom lighting. However, there's only few situations where this really makes sense from a storytelling standpoint. All right, next we'll talk about color temperature, which is a way of describing how warm or how cool the colors in a scene are perceived, right? So first off, let's just get the terminology straight here. Cool colors are, more bluish in color. We'll use these scenes from Dunkirk as an example, right? So cool colors are on the bluer side of the spectrum, and are actually, we'll see this in a second when we look at these different color temperatures. But cooler colors are actually going to have a higher temperature. Seems a little bit counterintuitive maybe, but cool colors have a higher temperature. It's going to be measured in degrees Kelvin, and warm colors, being more on the orangey side, are going to have a lower color temperature. Now, where this color temperature comes from has to do with how a theoretical blackbody object would appear when heated to the associated Kelvin temperature. Right, so if again this theoretical blackbody object was heated to 1,850 degrees Kelvin, then we'd end up with a very orangey color, representative of the sort of light cast by a candle, right? And increasing in temperature from there, we move through the sort of light cast by tungsten light bulbs, and then about around 3,000 Kelvin, we get sunrise, standard studio lights, we get into fluorescent lighting, and then higher degrees Kelvin, we actually get into like sunlight, direct sunlight at noon, and even higher into the more bluer colors, we get overcast daylight, and finally at around 10,000 and above, we get the color temperature of light cast without a cloud in the sky, just on a clear blue sunny day. Now, of course, depending on the white balance used by your camera, you're going to get, whatever sort of lighting that you're working with here, you're going to get that interpreted as normal, or you're going to get a normal, natural looking white point in the scene, right? So with 10,000 degree Kelvin lighting, you're not going to get like a super blue image produced. Again, this has to do with the white balance used by your camera. However, we still use these temperatures to describe different appearances for the lighting in the scene. Another great example being, again, from Christopher Nolan in Inception here, where an entirely different color palette, right, an entirely different temperature of colors, different temperature of lighting, and the resulting color palette being used for the different dream levels in the movie, right? So, right, even starting with Cobb and Ariadne in this dream here, just bending the laws of physics and seeing how everything works. A very natural color palette, very natural color temperature being used here. But then when we start getting into the dream levels, right, in the rainy car chase scene with the train and everything, take a look at the very cool colors used here, and kind of this very muted kind of dull, cool feel to the scene. Huge contrast between this and the hotel scene, which is just saturated in warm light, warm colors. And then again, a huge contrast between that dream level and the Arctic fortress scene, right? Which is basically completely desaturated and super cold in appearance. And finally, Limbo, again, kind of returning to that natural color temperature. We don't see any particular weight towards the warm side or the cool side. Maybe you could call this a little bit on the warm side, just looking at the tones in this image. But again, yeah, just noticing the fact here that a dramatically different color temperature is used to differentiate between the different dream levels, because of course in the movie we're like switching back and forth between these dream levels all the time. But of course, it's just one of the many ways that Christopher Nolan used to help the audience differentiate between the different dream levels as they were shown in the film. And finally, we come to the last topic here, which is 3-point lighting. We'll just quickly go over how it works, because this is probably the most versatile lighting setup that you can use to illuminate your subject, regardless of what type of image you're creating, whether it's a shot for a film or just a still image, creating a 3D render. Doesn't matter what you're doing, 3-point lighting will be a great place to start. So quite simply, we're going to have three, as the name suggests, 3 lights in the scene. We've got a key light, which is most often going to be the strongest light in the scene, positioned to one side of the character. You'll have the fill light, which usually is going to be less intense than the key light, positioned on the opposite side of the character. Let's draw a kind of like a center line here. Key light on one side, fill on the other. And then you've got the backlight, which is positioned somewhere behind the character. And we'll see the effects of a backlight in just a second here. All right, so in fact, let's start over here with some low key lighting. Let's just get used to seeing what type of light is being created by the key light and what is being created by the fill. Here's some 3D renders just showing perhaps some more obvious examples of 3-point lighting in action, but it's always great to go straight to films and see this being used in the real world. So again, from Blade Runner 2049, we have these different shots of Joy talking to Kay. So yeah, here in this case, we'd have a key light from this direction doing most of the illumination work, a very faint fill light, just making it such that the dark side of her face isn't completely black, right? So there's your fill coming in from that direction, and the backlight. It's kind of interesting, actually. We can see, again, the practical light source used in the scene to provide the backlight, which is giving this highlight just along her, along her head and her shoulder, And really, the backlight is usually used to separate the character from the environment, as is pretty obvious right here. Again, another example of joy, with this time not quite as strong of a key light. Again, not very strong a fill light either. In this case, it might actually be just a bounce card, which is just a big flat object, which is designed to bounce light onto a subject. So a fill light doesn't even have to be a light source. It can be an object used to just reflect extra light onto the subject. That could very well be what was being used for the fill in this case, because again, the dark areas of her face are not completely dark. They are nicely illuminated there. And we can see where the backlight is coming from, and we get this really nice definition here to separate the character from the background. Here's some more examples, right? Really, really strong key light. Probably, given that the dark side of Deckard's face isn't completely black here, probably another bounce card being used over here to bounce light onto his face. And this example is kind of interesting, right? Not really any appearance of a backlight at all. I guess because the key light is rotated so far to, I guess that would be, our left, Deckard's right-hand side, that the key light is actually kind of spilling over and illuminating this side of his, the shoulder on his dark side as well. So I guess there wasn't really need for a backlight in this shot. And again, one final example, we saw this shot before, soft key light coming from the window. Again, maybe a very faint fill or a bounce card on Kay's opposite side here. And again, not really any backlighting here. So he kind of. It's good that the background is illuminated enough that we have no difficulty differentiating the subject from the background. But yeah, actually no backlight used in this case. You can see some more examples here, just some different scenarios rendered out from a 3D scene. And the thing to realize from all these examples is that these are all examples of low key lighting, which is where we have high contrast between the key and the fill. High contrast. All right, so a fairly significant difference in intensities between the key and the fill. This is in contrast, no pun intended, to high key lighting, which is where we have roughly equal intensities on the key and the fill. Such as this scene with Kay talking to Love, right? Of course, this lighting is largely inspired by these light panels on the ceiling here, but not a lot of contrast in this lighting. Fairly equal intensities coming from both sides of the characters. Another rendered example here, and we call this high key lighting. All right, and so that is the general idea of how to set up 3-point lighting and the different sorts of results we can achieve using it.